Okay, so it's great to have you back, Mike, for the show. So let's just jump right into it. What do you think of President Biden's poll numbers? I mean, look, you know me. I don't believe in the polls, and they're certainly not, they're not really trustworthy. And on top of everything, it's really early. But should the White House right now be worried? Should Americans be worried?
I think probably the answer to your question is a resounding, unfortunately, yes. I think it's hard to say the sky is red when it's blue, right? The polls aren't good. Of course they're not good, but that's also not out of sort of the historical norm for incumbents. Incumbency is messy, right? It is easy to be a candidate and unite a cause around one objective, beating the other guy. President Biden has multi-priorities to juggle, and those priorities require making decisions that don't make everyone happy all of the time. And when you do that for 4 years, you take on a lot of water. And so a lot of it is just, the bare essentials of being an incumbent. And those poll numbers, look, when this becomes a two-person race, which, as we might know, we might find out tonight, could be as soon as tomorrow, those numbers are going to change. And I think people who maybe Democrats and independents who might be a little disaffected with the current state, they're going to remember why they got rid of this guy 4 years ago, and they're going to come back to the team.
Okay, so I'm watching, for example, CNN, and they had, reporters go out to New Hampshire, and they're speaking to several really, average Americans. They are America, right? I mean, the working class Americans out in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And they asked them, tell us, what is it about Donald Trump that you like, right? Yeah. And the funny thing is, the first thing they revert to is the things that they didn't like. Mm-hmm. His rhetoric, the nastiness, the divisiveness. But then going back to what they did like about him, somehow or another, he has convinced them that in 24 hours, he could fix the border situation. Now, I had this conversation yesterday with a woman from Florida, wealthy woman. She's a very close friend of a very dear friend of ours that moved out of New York, kept a residence, but moved out for residency status. And she, too, believes two major things. One, that Trump can fix the border situation literally overnight, and that the vaccinations that Joe Biden has pushed are not healthy for us and are actually killing us. And I'm not talking about someone who's not highly educated.
Yeah.
Not somebody who you could easily fool. Right. So what do we need to do, as I tried to do with her yesterday, and deprogram her?
Yeah, out of curiosity, did you ask her why he wasn't able to fix the border the 4 years that he was? And what did she say? And did you remind her that the Operation Warp Speed was produced under Trump?
Yeah. And on top of that, I also tried to use empirical data to explain that, truth be told, we lost 1 million Americans. And I tried to explain things, including I lost a family relative, my aunt. And I sat there and I'm saying to myself, let's just use facts. Forget about what Donald has told you, because he says a lot of things, much of which, if not almost all of it, is bullshit. Mm-hmm. We lost 1 million Americans. And I said, I want you to just make a visual of this, that there are 1 million chairs at people's dining tables that will not be sharing with their families, birthdays, holidays, celebrations, etc. And all of that was because he stood up and said, there's like maybe 3 cases, it'll be gone by the weekend, go back to work.
Yeah.
When he realized that it was too late, what did he do? Operation Warp Speed. And, you know, you got to give him credit for pushing it through. Now, she believes that the mRNA, the creator of mRNA, had told her that the COVID vaccination is unhealthy, that it's causing significant cases of myocarditis. This is what Americans are listening to. This is what they're believing. And somewhere along the line, this administration has never combated it. And after an hour, I almost threw my hands up and I said, you cannot convince certain people of certain things. You could convince them that Donald Trump is and would be terrible if he became president again, but not that he won't fix the border, which, as we all know, immigration has been a problem for 60 years plus?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And that, and that that Biden administration is ignoring all the issues surrounding the remnants of COVID.
Yeah, so there are 3 places I want to go with that to break it down. Because first of all, going back to COVID, it's hard to deprogram somebody who believes that kind of information. I guess the first thing I would want to know in my mind is, has that person ever voted for a Democrat before? And if not, then it sounds like they're searching for reasons to really just hate another Democrat. What I won't forgive the Trump administration for is their behavior when Biden was elected and trying to our transition team and our team going into the White House, trying to work with that White House to distribute those vaccines as soon as possible. And they really did everything in their power to choke off cooperation from every agency from working with us. And all we were trying to do was be able to hit the ground running by being able to distribute vaccinations in a fair and equitable way, and a priority way as soon as we got in. And that's pretty unforgivable for me, because that shows you the kind of people that, and the people that he chose, but that there was no one at any agency willing to defy him, to just work with the reality of the situation, which has been not just a tradition, has just been a norm for the transition of power going back 100 and some years. But like, this was a moment of crisis. And when I thought, like, in 2017, 18, and 19, there were a lot of examples that showed he really wasn't interested in the business of governing, of being president, like the day-to-day. Like, Biden thrives on public service and being a steward of the people and being thoughtful and wrestling and tackling complex issues. It became pretty clear that Trump was never really up for the job. But my God, there is no moment that tests you more than a crisis. I mean, think about Pearl Harbor and World War II, or the Cuban Missile Crisis and Kennedy. I'm trying to think, like the Challenger crisis and Reagan even. But 9/11 and Bush is the best example. I mean, leaders rise to the occasion to lead their country in a moment of crisis and then crisis.
You mean like the Civil War? That he could have ended in 24 hours?
Yeah, I want to come back to that, though, and the rhetoric.
We will.
But that's the biggest thing with him, is that he's not really up for the job. He doesn't know how to do the job. He's not really interested in the job. He's interested in a lot of extraneous things that really don't affect anybody else. But Michael, one of my bigger concerns about this election is that I was a TV producer in the 2016 cycle, which is when I first met you and heard about you, got to know you, and we, I I worked for Chris Matthews at Hardball at MSNBC, and we had Trump on as a candidate several times. Did town halls with him. By the way, he was the easiest candidate to get on the phone.
Yeah.
As you know. But a lot of these things, I feel like he says and does because he knows it makes liberals and sort of the mainstream center-left media lose their minds. It works. We all lose our minds over what he says, and then we talk about it non-stop all day long. Every day, week after week, until the election. So, I mean, I just remember how much oversaturation of attention we gave him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it ever hurt him. And so I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not his supporter. So I don't know what will make or break his support. But all I know is that these, objectively crazy things that he says don't seem to have much impact on him or his support. Even in the middle, And
you said something though, Mike. I got to tell you, you said something that really it struck me, and I hadn't thought about this yet. That I did not ask her, and I believe she is a Republican and always has been. That they're all searching for a reason, and that's probably the truth. Because even one of the folks that CNN was interviewing, a guy who works in a quarry.
Mm-hmm.
He turned around and he said that he believes that if Trump gets back into office, that his boss will receive significant tax breaks. And he believes, and the word believe popped up like four or five times. He believes that his boss would then pass along a percentage of the savings and increase everybody's wages, which would put more money into his pocket. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know where he came up with this belief that his boss, if making greater profit because some sort of a tax break would put or leave more money in his pocket or the company's pocket, that he's going to automatically distribute it to his employees unless they're his children, right? It just doesn't make any sense, but they're all searching for reasons. I think you actually nailed it, because that's probably the truth.
Yeah, I mean, how do you think that? I mean, I grew up loving politics. I was a political junkie since I was little, and I was glued to the TV and cable during the Clinton years. And to see what happened to Bill Clinton over, what now seems to be pretty,
standard.
Standard, par for the course. I mean, he lied in a civil suit, I guess. I don't know if it meant or warranted impeachment, but to see Republicans who persecuted Bill Clinton over something like that, and evangelicals and like the moral majority and the right wing, to see them fall in love and this like cult like personality for a guy who used to be a Democrat most of his life. I mean, you know better than I do his evolution in politics, but from what I remember is I thought he was mostly a Democrat or like a reform.
He's been everything. He's been independent, Democrat, and Republican. He's been it all. He's a man of the people.
yeah, the blue collar billionaire, right?
Yeah.
But the one thing that he's always been consistent about is his ability, or I should say a consistent skill set that he has is, Michael, like, he's just he performs. Yeah. He goes on stage. I don't know if much of what he says is calculated in a sense, other than he knows there are things that he will say. Like what he knows as media, right? He knows that MSNBC will cover him all day long. He doesn't seem to mind that.
No, in fact, he thrives on it.
But so I don't know what the answer is, because this was the same way in 2016. I mean, I'd be in the control room and we'd be covering, I remember we were covering some Hillary event. Hillary was speaking. We had to
cut away. Yep.
Cut away.
Yeah, because Donald was coming out of the office. I mean, it really was crazy.
He wasn't even at a podium, but his rallies were so, dynamically produced. There was ruckus, there was energy, there was everything live TV loves. And he's good at live TV.
He's good TV. Yeah. Well, then let me ask you this on the same thought. What do you then think of President Biden's current media strategy? Clearly, it is very different than Donald's. I mean, his recent ad that he put out, it's very simple. It's Trump confusing Nikki Haley for Nancy Pelosi with, Nikki Haley narrating it. It's directed right at Donald. It's direct, and it's also funny. But
exactly.
Mike, what, in your opinion, should President Biden be doing right now, because there's only 10 months left right now, to convince voters to choose him for a second term?
So you're right. Like, there is no, and Roger Ailes knew this well. Trump knows this well. There's no substitute for humor in advertising, in television, and political advertising. So, first of all, without a doubt, I'd love to see more of that from the Biden campaign, and it looks like they are doing that now. I think there was a period of time over in the fall, probably around Labor Day, where people, I think, started piling on about the Bidenomics stuff, and they spent a lot of money on ads, which didn't seem to move numbers, and people were critical of that, but it seems like they got the message, and they are starting to really take this guy on, and that's exactly what they need to be doing. Now, the problem is, I was going back in preparation for our conversation and reading an article from 1992 about the Bush White House, and how the economy had actually started to turn around in January of 1992. It was just making a strong recovery, and then months of growth. And they were banking that the good news of the economy was going to overshadow the perception that was already baked in. And I was reading a quote, because it was from a Democratic pollster who is still polling now, a guy named Jeff Guerin. I think he was Hillary's pollster. I think he does Democrats. He's a Democratic pollster. And he said, even if economic indicators get better between now and Election Day, the economy is the reason voters make changes. The American people believe, our economy is in deep trouble in fundamental ways. And unhappiness with the economy was greater than the reality of the economy. And so, going back to your question, I think, and that was a Democrat talking, I think voting starts at the end of September in some states. I felt like I was campaigning 4 years ago in Georgia for 4 or 5 weeks. So there isn't much time to change perception about the economy. But what you can do is make, and I feel like a cliche saying it, but it's just the only way to say it, is just make the contrast. Rip the bark off the guy. Make him completely unacceptable to any independent voter, because he is a foil. He is there are age concerns for both candidates that voters have, but there is a competency argument to make about Biden. We need to eat our vegetables and drink our medicine one more time and do the right thing, the mature thing, and just, the first lady would campaign saying, people don't want to be worried about government when they wake up. They don't want to think about government at all. And I thought that was actually, she hit the nail right on the head. It was something she would say in stump speeches in 2020 primary and general. It's so true. Your average voter doesn't think about government all day long or politics the way we do. They don't have to worry that we're on the verge of, whatever it is, democratic, collapse or World War III.
But just imagine if Trump was president right now, and the other day the stock market hit the all-time high record. Could you imagine the media coverage that he would have created for that? And people would be talking about the economy as if everyone's 401k was on fire, which, by the way, your 401k is probably doing very well, right? Mm-hmm. The Biden administration and those that are running his ads and his campaign, they're missing the opportunities. Sometimes everything that comes out of Trump's mouth may be crazy and it may be self-serving and it's certainly laudatory to him, but some of it is absolutely accurate. If you are the president at the time that the stock market hits its all-time high, say it. Say it, right? We hit it. Donald would be right now everywhere talking about how, thanks to him, forget about all of the technology companies and all of the manufacturing that is going on that's creating this rise in the stock market. No, he would take credit for it. Biden, the day comes and then the day goes. And that's why people don't realize that the economy is actually doing well. Yes, mortgage rates are higher. I get that.
Well, one of the things I said in an op-ed I wrote back in September for MSNBC.com was how they need to reevaluate sort of how they communicate to the American people and what they're communicating. And communicating to the American people isn't just reading and squinting, God bless them, in front of a teleprompter and reading to the American people. You have to be talking to the American people, talking with the American people. And a lot of that is in television, and what comes across is emotion. People should be able to turn the volume down on the television and be captivated by what they're seeing. Like they should be wanting to they should see an animated conversation going on. And so one thing you're right about, Michael, is that Donald Trump is his own and his best messenger.
Yep.
And he doesn't trust anybody else to be his messenger. He does it. There isn't a camera or a reporter or a microphone that he won't, walk by without talking to. I give him credit for how
the accessibility,
how often he engages with the media. Of course, it's up to the consumer of news to sort of evaluate what he's saying and whether that's true or not. It's consumers of news have a responsibility as well. And what worries me sometimes is that, John Kerry made this mistake when he was being pummeled by the Swift boat vets, and what we remember most is not really what the vets were saying about Kerry, but what we remember is the strategic error, the Kerry campaign, by not responding at all, by not saying anything, and allowing a void to be filled with disinformation. And that was the only thing people heard. And so now, and you know what? I don't know, Michael, if you knew this, but last year I saw this panel, a bipartisan policy center panel. Jay Carney, the White House press secretary for President Obama, he said something that I haven't forgotten. And he said the biggest mistake that he and President Obama made together, and they both have talked about it since, the biggest mistake they made in the White House was not engaging fast enough and aggressively enough on Trump and the birth certificate. That they just laughed it off and assumed, like the Kerry campaign, that voters and the American people and the media would see through it, and they didn't have to. There was that age in politics where, if you give it more oxygen, you're just giving it credibility. Well, no. You learn the hard way that narratives settle in if you don't, and at least
Well, look, let me be clear about this. The Obama administration and so many others, because as you can imagine, I was then bombarded by press, from written press to television, about birtherism.
Yeah.
What Obama and his people believed was that no one could stand for this clearly racist, statement by somebody, right? That attacking Obama, based upon his color of his skin. And no, it goes to show you that there is still in this country an enormous amount of both racism and stupidity, right? I mean, there's no way to get past that. And Trump has managed, in his abilities, to tap in to that racism and to the stupidity of, as he likes to say, the poorly educated.
Yeah, no question. And the point in telling that story is that it was about how we, as our people in the political sphere, engage in a really fast moving media cycle that is full of different platforms and ecosystems. And what he said was, he lamented, he was just like, we feel almost like we did a disservice by allowing Trump to claim this narrative that never went away, because we didn't engage fast enough, quick enough, and aggressive enough. And it was like the Kerry campaign believing the media was going to come to the rescue. I just don't want the Biden campaign to think that fact checks are going to be the key to winning this election. And that the media is going to ultimately, and voters are going to see through his absurdly offensive and whatever crazy.
Mike, remember, when you talk about slow in reaction, very different than the way Trump did it going back in 2016. I'll never forget when Bill Maher was making fun of Donald because it is such a racist thing to have said. So he said, well, prove to me that you're not the spawn of an orangutan, and I'll donate $5 million to your favorite charity. And so within 30 minutes of that, of me getting to the office, I had a copy of his birth certificate sent to Bill Maher, along with the name of the charity that we wanted the money to go to. Right. And he was like, well, it was a joke. We're like, well, we'll sue you. You made an offer and it's an acceptance. We sent you, right, this performance. And so it was funny. But that stupid little stunt owned the media for 72 hours. People don't realize 72 hours of owning the media is probably worth $100 million. But I want to move on and ask you this, Michael, because Biden is not going to be on the ballot in New Hampshire. I mean, what do you make of that debacle? And do you think that it's going to hurt? Do you think that it's going to hurt the Biden campaign in the long run?
The answer to your last question is no. I don't think it's going to hurt him in the long run. But it was and I said this on CNN a couple times last fall. I said this was a sort of a unnecessary, unforced error. The president's taken on enough water. He doesn't need to become the first incumbent in contemporary, presidential primary process history to not be on the ballots in Iowa and New Hampshire.
So for my listeners, explain to them what the mistake was here.
Well, there's some history here. In 2008, Michigan and Florida moved up their primary, defying DNC rules, I think, because states control their own elections. Mm-hmm. New Hampshire has it in their constitution that they are the first in the nation primary. The DNC made a change and decided to move South Carolina up as the first primary. And if the DNC, the DNC's, obviously the DNC is the party. Joe Biden is the leader of the party. So he would not be on the ballot in New Hampshire because in their view, the first primary is technically South Carolina. Now, it's a lot of process. It's a lot of nuts and bolts about how our primary system works or doesn't work. I just personally don't know if there was a value add to doing it. But, the president is the leader of the party. Parties themselves are not democratic. So you fall in line and you do it. Now, there's a fraction of people who didn't like that. So Dean Phillips is competing, a congressman from Minnesota, as are some others. But the mistake actually, Michael, seems to be, and I'm not clued in, and super PACs can't coordinate, but by the Biden allies creating a super PAC to write in Joe Biden and basically driving a write-in campaign, all that does now is sort of allows Dean Phillips to have this scale to measure his loss by. I think Biden may very well will probably win the write-in vote, but now, like, most incumbents win by 84%.
Yeah.
So he has allowed. By doing this fake, I don't know.
It becomes a negative narrative. That's it.
And they hate process stories, but now they're going to get a month of. Again, we'll wait to see how things turn out tonight, right? Like, if it's a blowout, it won't matter one bit, and then he'll go on to South Carolina, and nobody will remember this, and it will just be a lot of like process stories and negative attention he got for no reason. Now, the margin of victory will be really important. I mean, I forget what the margin was in 1968, but I think Johnson won it handily and still got out of the race because his performance was, I think, only in like the 50s or 60s.
So let me ask you this then. So let's say for any number of reasons, Trump ends up out of the race and Nikki Haley becomes the GOP nominee. Again, obviously, this is a hypothetical. How do you think that Biden will do against her, especially with independents?
I think it will be a tougher race to run than against Donald Trump. I think Nikki Haley has a lot of appeal. And, New Hampshire can sometimes course correct, right? We saw it with you guys in 2016. I think we saw it in 1988. George Bush came back and won there. We saw it, there's been a few times when New Hampshire has done the course correcting. It's also been sort of a reaction to Iowa, whether it was Bernie Sanders in 2020 or Hillary Clinton in 2008. And John McCain in 2000. It can be just a reaction to what Iowa has done, but have very little meaning as well, because there's the rest of the campaign is mostly closed primary systems where it's just Republicans voting and not independents. And so that's Haley's problem, but that's Haley's concern if she wins. If she loses New Hampshire, I don't know, Mike. It looks
bleak, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's really amazing too? So the extent of the disinformation, misinformation, malinformation that Trump and his team spew, it's truly overwhelming. I'll give you an example. One of the things that his people and he have been touting is that if Nikki Haley does well, or if Nikki Haley wins, it's only because Democrats are voting her in because New Hampshire has it where you can vote for whoever you want. That's just not true. And I was trying to explain that as well the other day to somebody. Democrats don't get to vote in the Republican primary in New Hampshire. Only undeclareds get to vote, not registered Democrats. But Trump put that out there, and I can't tell you the number of people who have been saying this and repeating it. I don't know why, after everybody knows that 99.95, it's like Ivory soap, of what comes out of Donald Trump's mouth is bullshit. It's made up. It's bullshit. Complete and total bullshit. They still take what he says and they regurgitate it as if it's fact.
But
I don't understand.
But the same is true, as we were talking before, with the media. No, God love them. A lot of them are my friends. But the oversaturation, just knowing everything he says, we take and we analyze, or when does the shock wear off? Because it wore off on me a long time ago. So, and that's the danger, I think, Michael, in that by making him the center of our media universe 24/7, we're going to immune people from feeling like he's doing anything beyond the norm, or beyond, like, what I'm trying to say is that they're going to feel almost like the cake is baked and nothing has really changed about Trump. So the more outraged we get becomes more outrage over outrage over outrage. When does it just become, when does it become sort of flat to voters? You know,
I don't know. I mean, I tell everybody, if you want to know who Donald Trump truly is, don't listen to me. Don't listen to anyone. Just listen to Donald. Listen to what he says and make your own decision. Are you into an autocracy and to destroy our democracy? That's not me saying it. It's him saying it.
Right. And, but like, I guess my question is, during the Hollywood Access thing, or Access Hollywood thing, sorry, that wasn't enough to really change minds. And that was even on tape. Like, there was no, like, disguising him. I think he even apologized for it. But, like, it didn't really change.
No, he's never apologized.
No,
what he did is he rationalized it and said it was locker room talk.
Oh, locker room
and
talk.
That was something that was actually something Melania made up.
Really?
Yeah. Can I ask you a question instead? Let's just, as an example, let's take it to foreign policy. Looking at the situation, for example, in Israel, the president's support for Israel is not popular, though I'm not sure that most people even understand Biden's policy towards Israel. What should the Biden administration be doing right now to change this narrative?
Well, look, this president is a loyalist to Israel through and through, and he's always been that way. He's been a defender of the state of Israel for going back to the 70s. I think he talks about it in his book. It's been examined. He has a relationship with Bibi that goes back to the 80s, when Bibi was a staffer here in DC working at the Israeli embassy. They've had a relationship. It's been tested over the years, certainly, especially when Biden was vice president. But and I'm not a foreign policy expert, Michael, but I know, I understand politics, and my concern is not so much about his position on Israel or how he performs in this area. It's how it translates to those voters who were souring on him or indifferent to him in the first place, and that it adds to sort of a narrative that makes that, again, going back to the 2016 example, that will sort of motivate voters to protest both of the candidates for someone that will not win. And we won't know the answer to that until we know who gets ballot access or not.
Somewhere, people are convinced simply because Donald said in 24 hours he could end the Israel-Hamas war.
Mhm.
I don't understand. And again, and I want to just stick with this for a second. I don't understand why Biden's strategy and the position that America is taking, which is to help Israel, a democracy, an ally of America forever. The fight is between democracy and terrorism.
Mhm.
So I'm just not sure what the fuck these people are even thinking. And I don't think that there is a strategy that Biden or anybody for that matter, I don't think if God himself came down from the heavens and developed a strategy that had any benefit towards Israel, that these same people would not be turning around and saying, I don't like your strategy. It doesn't make a difference. They are, for whatever the reason may be, they are anti-Israel. And again, I understand the position that there are innocents that are being killed in Palestine. I acknowledge that. I also acknowledge that there's still, 150 hostages that were taken? And I say to people when they bring this up, I would just like for you to answer one quick question for me. Assuming that there was a festival going on in Texas.
Coachella.
Bunch of kids, well, Coachella, whatever it might, exactly, Coachella. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Mexico sends over in paragliders and little planes, and they bust through the wall and they start shooting everybody, taking hostages. What would a reasonable response by America towards Mexico be? What would you want, especially if it was your relative? Just give me that answer. And of course, nobody has an answer for it because, again, it goes right back to what you said before. They're searching for reasons why not to like Joe Biden.
Yeah. And I think that's going to feed into a lot of, again, people. I think it's a largely confined to people on the left and a lot of younger voters who feel disaffected or disenchanted or indifferent to Biden. That they are searching for these reasons, and they're not. It's hard for them. I don't know why, or they're just not as informed or educated to put things into context. Go back to 9/11. First of all, this is a president who got us out of a war of Afghanistan. You might not like how he got us out of the war. That's a separate question. But he doesn't like war. Biden wanted us to get out of Afghanistan. So, but this is a war between Israel and a terrorist group, the same war that we fought with a terrorist group called Al-Qaeda. And I think memories just run really short. And it's important to examine history. And Israel, war is not pretty. It's dissatisfying. It's uncomfortable. It is hard to watch, and it is painful. And that's why the president got us out of Afghanistan.
Well, he really didn't have a choice there. That was already preset under the Trump administration, so he had to do it by a specific day. I mean, at the end of the day, I still consider it to be, you're right, it wasn't pretty, but it certainly was effective. I want to jump into something different for a second. Tell us about Hunter Biden. I mean, how do you think that Hunter is handling this House investigation so far? And more importantly, what do you make of Republicans' obsession with this guy? Is it all in service to their Biden crime family narrative, or do you think it's something else?
Well, let's start with the first question on Hunter, because you were just talking about this a couple of minutes ago on how Trump is so good at, when he wants to take credit for something, making it the story. I've got to say, I've been just incredibly impressed with the way Hunter and his team, led by Abby Lowell, have conducted their strategy, because both times that Hunter, made public appearances, the first time when he gave remarks, it is a page out of Donald Trump and Roger Ailes' playbook. It is live television, element of surprise. It is confronting your opponents, taking them by surprise, forcing them on their feet, forcing their backs against the wall, and sort of manipulating the coverage, owning the coverage. And that's what he did. He forced those silly Republicans from oversight into a hallway for an unexpected press conference that they had no idea was coming. And they had to have their own, hallway presser. And it was, he made them react to him. He owned the coverage, and all eyes were on him. And I think the narrative started to develop that he was fighting back. And I think he really owned the coverage. And then again, with the appearance on the Hill, I mean, just watching the networks just go live instantly. And then not only just go live, but force the networks to also scramble and cut away from the hearing to go into the hallway to follow under to get more sound bites. They were just.
I mean, you do have to admit that James Comer looked like a total asshole, during that hearing. I mean, and Raskin. I mean, boy, did they tear Comer apart? Yeah, but and rightfully so.
But what Hunter did was incredibly important, because not only did he take a page out of the Trump Ailes playbook and own the coverage and sort of manipulate the media. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, but forced the media to cover what he wanted instead of what the Republicans wanted, which they must have hated. But he was speaking and reacting to a different audience. It wasn't even for those House Republicans. It is to say to Democrats, yep, I'm fighting back. I'm not going to let them go after my reputation and my family. And I'm going to start punching back and hitting back. And you have a reason to want to root and support this team, because we're going up against a bunch of disingenuous folks on the Hill with a lot of skeletons in their own closets.
You could say that again.
And so I thought that it was executed very well. I think Hunter won the media narrative. I think most legal experts that day said it was a very good move for him. And then,
I totally agree. Agree.
What you were saying about the Republicans, the dangerous thing here, Michael, that I don't know if they care, because it's more short-term gratification thing for them, because Trump wants, Joe Biden impeached. They want revenge, and they want to use the president's son. They saw him as a target-rich environment to do that. What they are doing is firing stray bullets. They are opening up a can of worms that is going to put family members, adult children, in-laws, cousins, brothers, siblings, parents in play for the future. How can they make Hunter Biden a target and take other family members off the table? Now, there are a lot of members of Congress in powerful positions who aren't on Fox News or aren't on MSNBC, but are putting their heads down and doing their jobs. Does the other side, in an effort to make them more vulnerable, start looking at where their kids are making their money, where their incomes are coming from, or where their law firms or businesses are getting clients from, or whether there's overseas investments? I mean, they are opening up a huge new front in political combat.
And they know it. Michael, let me just jump into something, because you brought up, Kamala Harris before. Right now, she's actually having a moment. Her activism around abortion, it's getting noticed. And we all know that the saddest part about being a vice president is that, you're never really in the spotlight until you're in the spotlight. Mm-hmm. And she's had a recent appearance, and I saw it on The View, that even Kayleigh McEnany praised, which is really hard to believe. So, my question to you is, why is it taking so long for the vice president to establish herself? Why hasn't this administration given her, some free reign to take on at least this one topic and run with it?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I would be lying if I said I knew the answer to your question. But what I will say is that she's not a staffer. She doesn't get assigned things. She is a partner to the president. So she is, look, he cares about her deeply, and her success reflects on him and his success. And he not only cares about her, but believes she is the future of our party. And so, and she's also an incredibly talented individual. You don't get to be San Francisco Attorney General of the, fifth largest economy in the world, California, and vice president, by not being, extremely talented and having some really natural political gifts. And she does. She's extremely, just being around her, she's warm and charismatic and funny, and her husband is incredible too. That said, she's so young in her career. Michael, when Joe Biden became vice president, he knew who he was. He knew his brand. He had been around for 4 decades. And while playing second fiddle to the president was the biggest transition for him, he still knew who he was and was comfortable and knew the things that he was good at. And that was like legislative lobbying and domestic policy and wrangling his old colleagues on the Hill, Mitch McConnell, people like Eric, working with Republicans. Kamala's still so young in her biography. And to be meteoric, to have this meteoric rise, almost like Richard Nixon, another California senator, to go from a member of Congress to vice president in a really short time. You have to be honest and examine things as they are, and you can't sugarcoat it. Like, she's finding her voice. And I think the Dobbs thing is her natural space. And I think she's going to be extremely effective at it. And it's going to be great for her. But also, McEnany said that because she knows the truth, that Democrats, it is really hard to beat Democrats in a post-Dobbs world. It just is. I mean,
let's hope Democrats are right about that.
If they're able to put that on the ballot in states like Florida, even if we can't win Florida, it's going to force Republicans to spend money there, where they would instead be spending in Georgia or Arizona. But if you get an abortion, a choice ballot measure, the way Bush did in 2004 in Ohio with gay marriage, and Whitmer did in 2022, it's going to be an interesting state to watch. It doesn't mean Democrats will win, because it's been very hard to win in Florida, but it will definitely force Republicans to spend money in places that they otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then, because Republicans, they keep trying to find this angle to impeach President Biden. And we all know that there's no evidence for them to do it. So my question to you is, do you think that it's going to backfire on them, or are Republicans hoping that just by saying the word impeachment over and over and over again, that somehow it'll negatively impact the president in the polls and somehow benefit Trump?
Yeah, well, I mean, you saw Kevin McCarthy make that claim 8 years ago with Benghazi. It brought down her poll. It brought down her poll numbers. It seems like that was their intent. It is. I think their goal is to impeach him to sort of nullify a corruption argument against Trump, or to neutralize it. And the problem with them, the problem with the Republicans have had is nobody, including them and Democrats, expected their margin of victory in 2022 to be so damn small. They probably would have done this much sooner, and they probably would have been moved faster if they didn't have 18 vulnerable members in Biden districts, 12 of whom I think won by, Biden won by double digits. So it's really going to, I think those guys walked the plank in order to get that first impeachment inquiry vote. I can't see a world in which any of those 18, enough of those 18, I should say, actually support a vote to impeach the president.
Yeah, I don't see it either. But they don't stop talking about it.
That said, I don't think that, unlike in 1998 with 99 with Bill Clinton, Democrats have control of the Senate. I think Schumer, and I bet Mitch McConnell would probably go along with it. I bet they just dismiss it and don't even have a trial. I'm saying worst case scenario.
I agree. By the way, I agree with you on that.
I mean, I would hope that they try to. But look, Joe Biden didn't need money from anybody. When Joe Biden and Jill Biden left the White House, they both got book deals. And I think both of them together were worth $17 million. They didn't need money. And Hunter certainly wasn't.
By the way, that's a far cry from the income that gets derived by presidents, post fact. I mean, let's be clear about that one.
Oh, yeah.
I do just because time is running out. I want to ask you this because this is all past history now, but you were part of the president's transition team. My question
I was with the first lady on the transition.
Yeah. How difficult did the Trump administration make it for the incoming administration to do what they need to do? I mean, did it feel as if they had planned to stay? Because something just seemed off there.
What I remember, now I wasn't on the front lines because, transitions are formed months in advance, as you know. And so there was a team in place trying to work with them. From what I remember, from what I know, our lawyers and our transition lawyers and teams were prepared for that going into it. I don't know if they ever predicted anything like, nobody ever predicted anything like January 6th.
I did.
I think that there was.
I did.
What?
I did.
Well,
in 2018, I stood before the House Oversight Committee and I said to the entire world, 100 million people watched that hearing ultimately. And I said, my biggest fear is if that Trump loses the 2020 election, that there will never be a peaceful transfer of power. That's what I said.
You were right. There wasn't.
I'm sorry. So go ahead. You were saying?
No, I just said I was incredibly impressed. And I give a lot of credit to people like Jeff Zients and Jen Psaki and Bob Bauer and Ted Kaufman, all Johannes Abraham, who led our transition team, but from what I remember and what I know, there was just complete intransigence. They were not helpful, and I think Chris Whipple lays that out very clearly in his book on Biden's first year or so. What was sad was how they directed all their agencies not to cooperate with us. And, it's just not the way things have ever been done. I'm not saying that, but it's also, it doesn't have to be done simply because of tradition or norms. It has to be done because of continuity of government, so that government continues to run effectively and smoothly and seamlessly. But again, this isn't a man who particularly cares much about running a government or
who cares about this country. Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's evident. And but living that and walking into the East Wing, again, we had no count. I was Googling academic documents to that were research based from institutions to see how East Wings were run, because there was no transition for us. And, I walked in and squatted basically in an office that became my office. And there were Catholics were Trump signs everywhere. And Melania's
shocking they didn't glue them right to the walls. But Mike, as the hour comes to a close, I have one last question for you. It's a personal one. Tell us if you would, some of your favorite memories of working with Dr. Jill Biden. I mean, she has a wonderful reputation of being incredibly kind and very proactive. specifically, I'm really interested in hearing about I'm just really interested in hearing about her secret and historic visit to Ukraine after the war had begun, because I believe that you were there.
Yeah, she was the first highest public figure to travel into the country. And not only that, we brought, Mrs. Zelenska at a huge risk to her security and her life, because she is number 2 on Putin's kill list, out of hiding for the first time in 4 months. And that would be the most, dramatic that was probably one of the best moments of the entire experience working for her, because it was history. I was riding next to her in the limo, in the convoy into Ukraine, and kind of watching her as she put on her game face, and she's very focused. She knows. One thing I loved about working for her is she's extremely coachable. Michael, she always wants to do better at things, because she's not a natural politician. She'll be the first one to admit it. She's not a politician at all. And so she would always say, Michael, you have to be honest with me and give me honest feedback after interviews. Otherwise, I can't get better. And after a while, and I was always nervous to give her honest feedback, because first of all, she gets a lot of people in her ear giving her conflicting feedback. And I, as an athlete, I don't like people to get inside their heads too much. And, but it was genuine that she always wanted. And then I finally figured out, I owed her more than to not give her honest feedback. But the thing about her is that she reminds me of like one of my Italian aunts, because she has this Northeastern sort of, not accent, but like dialect that you can comes through when she says coffee. She's not entirely like polished as a public speaker, which is to me her superpower that makes her more relatable, is that she can make mistakes and she's imperfect, and people appreciate that, because most people are themselves and they appreciate that in others. And she's just such a normal person. And she was as a boss, working for a first lady. And I don't know what it was like to work for Melania, but Dr. B was in the office every day. Even when she went to teach school, she would come back and come to the office. So you get a lot of time with the principal. And again, I traveled with her on the campaign, the ups and downs of the primary in general. But we were doing 4 or 5 events a day in the primary, and she was still teaching full time. Same in the general, same virtually, and her schedule in the White House, the travel schedule. And, she's just incredible at 71, I guess, 72. I wouldn't want to be doing all that, but it really is sort of, to me, sort of a reflection of their marriage, I guess, and their love story, because he had done this twice before. 2020 was, I think, her 14th or 15th campaign. Most people at 70 just want to retire, and they could have gone to their beach house and just retired and been happy with 5 or 4.5 decades in public service.
Yeah.
Great marriage, wonderful kids and grandkids. But I give her so much credit, because without her support, I don't know if he could have done it.
Yeah. And I totally look. You're right, and it's just completely.
She's an asset. She's just a relentless campaigner for somebody who's an introvert and shy. She's a relentless campaigner, and she will do what it takes. And the last thing I would say, Michael, is that people don't know about her and underestimate about her is her competitiveness. And any time she sees people on TV or hears people talking about doubting his chances or doubting him, I can only say I can't imagine, but like that just makes her want to do this even more.
Good, because we're going to need it. Michael, let me say, my friend, thank you for joining me again on Mea Culpa. It was good to see you. And as this thing heats up even more, I'm going to definitely ask you to come on back. Okay?
We'll talk. All right.
Thank you, Mike.
Sounds good.
Bye.
All right.